Okay, well, welcome everyone to the Rory James podcast. I'm James and I'm joined by Rory. Rory, hello.
Hello. Welcome again. Welcome again.
So today we're going to go back to our more traditional format of having a chat on this podcast. And Rory, you came up with the idea of the internet being sort of the focus of our chat today.
Mm.
And you've actually got a bit of family background in the internet. So I wanted we want to start off with that really and talking about sort of how you and I guess your family sort of connect to this whole thing of the topic of the internet.
Well, my dad was involved with the Rediffusion TV company originally, and was always very much into computing in the 1970s. And I think it was basically, and then he was helping out one of my old schools with Autos computers, and we always had computers in our house. And my brother was interested, my dad was interested, and then in the mid 90s, my dad started up an internet firm that ran for 14 years in a in the basement of an office in the basement when my parents worked in the office, and that started up as the internet firm. And I remember always using the old dial-up systems onto the internet and stuff like that. And I was very fortunate because I was one of the earliest users of email and that kind of stuff, as it became introduced into the more of the mainstream, just because of my dad's interest and the involvement in the internet company. It was called Mailbox Internet.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
Mm,
So, and that
yeah.
was a while ago, right? We're sort of talking the '90s, aren't we? Is that right?
Yeah, 94 it started, I think. 94 is certainly when I remember it starting. And the first thing I was aware of was I was downloading a black and white photograph of Sharon Stone sitting on a couch. And and my dad was showing me how it all worked. And I think it took about 18 minutes to download the photograph. And it
That is
was
fantastically random.
it's
That
amazing
is
to
superb.
it's and I remember seeing the photograph slowly emerging on the screen like that, and now it's so fast for all of us, and thinking about these earlier things. And I used to use for email and things like that. And a few years later, as the company became started, I was working in a I was working at school on a thing called Radio Trelaw, which was a radio station on tape. It was a radio station, and we used to record it on a cassette and distribute it. And part of the news, part of the involvement was that they had Internet Club on Thursdays, because we used to report that on the school news. You see, and my dad, when hearing one of the tapes, said, "Why are they using it just at, the Internet Club on Thursdays? They should be using it in the mainstream." uh, everybody should be using the internet. And he used to say that everybody would be using it, but obviously at the time it took a long time for that to work. The first thing ever uh, ordered on the internet was a pizza. The first mobile phone call was in 1985, and the first ever text message in 1991 said "Merry Christmas." So there's a
That's an
few. So
outstanding knowledge.
there's a few random facts for you. Can you remember your earliest involvements?
Well, I've got a vague memory of us getting a PC
Mm.
and it being this big old chunky thing in our living room, and then it eventually getting dialed up, and that noise it used to make, the dial-up internet used to. I remember
Yes.
that
Yeah.
noise.
Yeah.
And the only real memory I have is the desktop wallpaper on the computer was of like a leopard or something like that. Just one of those weird things that stuck in my mind. But I don't really remember anything about the internet apart from using Ask Jeeves, which was the poor man's Google, and
Yes.
eventually got defeated by Google, I think.
Yeah, I remember there was an advert on the telly. If there's anything you need to know, just ask Jeeves, like
Yes,
that. Some
absolutely, yeah.
early on stuff. But it's
Yeah.
amazing now, because obviously I find that with things like YouTube and Facebook and Instagram, as long as you use it proportionate to support your life in terms of sort of getting just a support system, but you can do a whole TV's worth of viewing on YouTube, and there are all kinds of facts that you can find out over the internet. And it's pretty incredible to think that
Yeah.
even now that we are talking and recording over the internet, isn't it?
Yeah,
Really?
exactly. And obviously that your big passion's music. So have you is it changed the way you sort of listen or interact with music over the years from sort of pre-internet to nowadays where everything's internet?
Not really, I suppose. It's just a matter of again, this YouTube thing of things being so available to people. I mean, it's I suppose we all miss using videotapes and cassettes and things, but people are so used now to using the internet as a really good entertainment system, not just as a education system, but entertainment. Actually, I bet you that was the birth of the phrase edutainment, both at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, that's probably a good shout.
Yeah,
Yeah,
really
and
true.
of course we're even recording music together, like we've done in previous podcasts, over the internet and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
We don't even need to be in the same room to record music nowadays because of the internet.
That's true. I think one should try and be, with bands that you still need the bits in the studio where there's the real musicians interacting together. But it's, to know that we have this extra facility is really really good. I mean, it's often said that bands like the Beatles were using um, early technologies to do certain things that you can do over the internet and far far easier now. But at least you can,
Yes.
and things. And I think and then that would get into the AI world, as it were, in terms of again, I think that relates back to something we did before with the AI, wasn't it, about using it in proportionate terms, and people are they know that AI is a new technology, and also that has to be very controlled, as we said in one of our previous podcasts. But when the internet started up, people were sort of thinking, "Wow, this is new. What's it going to be like?" And people did adapt to it, although it's slightly different from AI, of course. But you get the idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess
Yeah,
there were a lot of fearmongers about the internet back in the day.
I guess
Um,
so to a certain extent. Yes, yes. I mean,
yeah.
there was an interesting thing. My dad's company, as I say, was in this local office basement, and they were doing a, pr- uh, an afternoon where anybody local could just come and use it. And this old lady came into the office off off the street and said to one of my dad's colleagues, "I'd like to use the internet to see how it all works," but and said to the colleague, "But please, will you do it for me?" And the colleague said, "No, you can do it." And she spent the afternoon literally surfing the internet for the first time in her life
Wow.
in that office.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll tell you a quick story. There's a when my dad used to work for Reader Fusion, this was earlier to technology. They used to sell internet, TVs, and in one instance, I remember my dad saying they sold a TV to a particular lady, and it was all tuned in, and the engineer came round, and it was all fine, everything was plugged up, and and then she started using it. She started using it as you would conventionally, and the channel kept turning on its own accord, and they didn't know why.
Mm.
And so they spoke to the engineer, and the engineer said, "It's all fine." Nobody could figure out why it was turning over, and so the lady invited the engineer back for tea, and they said, "So why don't I pop down and we'll have a look to see why it's turning?" And what had happened was the lady had a pet parrot, and the pet parrot was squawking at the same frequency as the TV control.
That's insane. That is incredible. What are the chances of that?
Amazing, isn't it? Really? Do,
Yeah, yeah.
do you have other internet experiences yourself?
Oh, nothing as bizarre as that, I have to say. Um, but I do have a memory of the first COVID lockdown when we were all using the internet for absolutely everything. Like, family get-togethers were all being done online,
Yes.
and catching up with people and all that kind of thing was
Yeah.
all online. Sort of relied on it massively then.
Oh yes, I remember. I was saying I was at my parents' house during the COVID phase at one point, and my mum and dad often do these quiz nights, and things. And our friends, one, my mum had a split screen, literally four people on her mobile,
Mm,
and so if you imagine that like a square within the window, and each person was a square, so you've got four people on one screen, and one person would be from Bristol, and another person would be from America and Switzerland, and there we were in Devon on this screen all together, and you think to yourself, well, isn't that amazing that we can see all these people from all over the world, and
yeah,
there we were in the lockdown process, but
yeah.
at least that there was the technology. They do you remember they were playing that large concert all those there were all these famous pop stars were doing like interactive concerts online and broadcasts
Yes, of course.
from their
Yeah, yeah,
houses. It's amazing, isn't it? Really.
yeah.
And
Incredible. Yeah.
and relating back to what we said before with the AI, if we recorded this in 5 years' time, what new things would happen? You know?
Yeah, very true. Yeah,
Amazing.
things are moving so fast now with technology that hard to keep up, really. But
Yeah.
we've had some great anecdotes there on the internet. So any final sort of stories or comments to add on sort of your views on the internet before we wrap it up?
Not really. I've just really come to see the advantages of it, as I know you have, but also you know, I mean, for example, my dad helped me plug in the computer last week. I haven't got the faintest idea how to how what plugs in here, plugs in there, whether you had to put 001 in the box to make this work. But I'm so grateful for it all working. And now, when you go on Instagram, all these um, analysis of old technologies and things that are preserved is incredible. And I can only hope that under the right circumstances, when it's all controlled, we'll get everything. Everything's going to be so preserved in a very, very special way over the years that we're going to experience. And this is why we're going to come back to this. Do you remember we said in the first podcast we should do it again? We should do the subject of the first podcast. We should do that in 10 years.
Yes, yeah.
Let's do the 10th anniversary of this. So in other words, it's 2026 now, isn't it? So 2036. So the 21st of April 2036 would be the 10th anniversary of this recording, right?
Yep.
And what would we be saying then? We'll certainly refer back to this when we do it. See you next time.
Let's pencil it in our diaries, 21st of April 2036. And we'll see what we'll be talking about then.
It's strange to think of it that way, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
But let's do it. Meanwhile, see you next time, and thank you so much as always.
Bye-bye.
Bye.